50 million questions. Hold on, let me have the questions like in front of me.
And we are live. See, she didn't listen to me. I told her we was going live. She thought I was playing. We are live. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Billy Rowe. Today is Tuesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. If it is Tuesday, you should already know what that means by now. It is time for a first row Intersation. Tonight's topic being mental health in the community with Kristin Griffin. If you could please, Kristin, since you were already talking when we came on live, if you could please say hello to the people.
Hi, everybody. I was not fully prepared for it to start. He said go like within a matter of seconds.
Hey, go means go. This is the thing. Go means go. When it's 8 o'clock, I click that. I click that. No, I don't have that. I just push broadcast, and when it says click, we're live, I say, and we're live. I told you I was clicking it. Anyway, tonight's topic again being mental health in the community. I hope you guys are. Oh, what's going on, brother Damien? And Sylvia. First in the roll call was Sylvia. So what's going on? I appreciate you guys joining us live for tonight's show. We are going to have a really good time tonight. And even though the topic, when you think of mental health, typically people think depression and things that are pretty heavy. I want to make sure that tonight's energy is really up and really lively. So I hope you guys are ready for a very fun show. I hope you guys are ready to have a good time and to have the growth that we all get to experience on every Intersation. So with that, talking about tonight's topic, before we even get there, let's talk about what an Intersation is. For those who are new to the content or the concept of Intersation, what Intersation is simply when you take interview and conversation, you merge those two together and you get Intersation. So in my life, I'm very fortunate to have a robust network of friends, family, coworkers, and beyond that I get to interact with on a regular basis. And in our interactions, we have these conversations that typically go beyond that surface level of, hey, how are you? What you been up to? Blah, 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 into more deep and meaningful things about what does that mean to you? Why do you think that way? And we get to share very deep and intimate thoughts with each other. And so since I get to have those types of conversations and the person and I that I'm having those conversations with, we typically grow from those. What came about was Intersations. Intersations is literally a lens into those conversations so that the growth that we experience during those conversations is now open and available to you. So though tonight you will see Kristin and I speaking back and forth visually, realize that this is an interactive channel, an interactive network, an interactive series where you can get involved as well. Whether you're involved in the live chat, you can ask a question, you can answer a question, you can add a nugget, add a comment, add whatever you feel that's going to bring value and substance to the conversation. So don't be thrown off that just because you see two people doesn't mean that there's not a group of us in here having this conversation. So with that, I want to welcome you again to the first row. Let's jump into tonight's topic, mental health in the community. And Kristin, if you could, just tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Well, I actually work within the special education community. I came from special education. Now I work in a home and hospital department for the local school district here in Corona. I'm a mother of 3 and an active member with basketball youth groups, basketball youth leagues within San Diego community. So I'm usually surrounded with a lot of different kids, working with different children and adults in our community.
All right. Oh, that was such a professional resume you gave there. So as you see, we have somebody qualified then, because I'm not qualified for every conversation. I just come and I ask the questions sometimes and I have a little bit of insight. But we have somebody qualified to be able to speak about this topic tonight, somebody who I'm sure has had multiple experiences when it comes to mental health in the community in which she lives. So with that, I want to jump into tonight's topic, mental health in the community. Let's get started. Kristin, the very first question that I want to ask you, and it's the same question I ask at the beginning of every single Intersation. What does the topic of mental health in the community mean to you?
The topic actually means like breaking down the stereotypical norms that we actually face in society, while bringing about awareness to all communities that it's not necessarily what we like to call the white people disease. It affects all races, all ages, and all groups of social class. So it's not just a white people disease. It happens in our communities. We just don't speak about it. So just creating awareness and opening up people's minds to what it really is.
Yeah, I always think that's interesting. I think they call it racial bias when they say all the negative attributes you attribute to some other race that's not yours, and all the positive ones you're like, yeah, that's all us. That's all us. Yeah. That racial bias is very interesting, but it can create an ignorance. And for me, when I start thinking about the topic of mental health in the community, I think about a lot of that because of the neighborhood I grew up in, a lot of the minority experience with mental health issues, not necessarily that any experiences. I think all experiences are different, but I think the minority experience it's almost like the military. Don't ask, don't tell. Like, don't ask if they have a mental health issue, and if they do ask you, you don't tell them that you have a mental health issue. And even with you doing special ed, I remember being in elementary school that there was a special ed class that had special ed curriculum. I can't tell you a single student that I remember from that class. And it's not that I was like, oh, they got cooties and I don't want to deal with them. But there was like, it was almost, I felt in some aspects, because they needed to be for the educational purposes, separated from the quote unquote normal kids, which are just the kids who don't really bring necessarily all of their special education needs to the surface. But I feel like they were separated almost in the sense of which they were also forgotten. And I feel like that's what this topic means most to me, is mental health in our communities is almost like this taboo topic that we don't talk about. And when you don't talk about something, or when you're not honest about something, you tend to forget, or you tend to become deaf, dumb, and blind to it. And so those are the things that this topic for me tonight that I want to explore on. How do we bring that awareness that you spoke about? How do we shed that light? And then not only shedding that light, how do we begin to address and provide solutions within the community that we have? And that community can just be your own personal tribe or the end of the greater community of society. So that's what it means to me. I hope that you had a great time with that very easy question, because we're jumping in rapid fire tonight.
Got my notes. I have my notes.
You got your notes? Okay, well, don't take too much time reading, because we didn't come to watch you read. We came to hear you talk.
So, I just want to make sure I get all my points across.
All right, fair enough. So my next question that I have for you is, how do you define mental illness? Like your personal definition. I know you probably have a clinical definition of it, but how do you personally define it?
I just define it as the mind's incapability of being able to express emotions or their behaviors. It's something that you can't control. That's how I personally describe it.
So how do you see that then manifest in like the real world? Because it's hard to see somebody's mind not kicking on all cylinders, or having misfires and not making the connections necessary. But how do you see that in the real world?
I see it mainly like misdiagnosis, somebody who, like a child who has like bad behavior,
mm-hmm.
or like someone who's highly emotional, or somebody who's kind of disconnected. Sorry about that. Home phone. We have an old home phone.
You still have a home phone?
I do. An old home phone.
Does your home phone have a mute?
I'm about to cut it off. Hold on.
It's super loud.
We're running to get the home phone. I was really hoping the home phone would not go off. See, it goes off. Sorry.
That's all right.
Are you muting me?
No, I'm not going to mute you. You take your time. I will wait for you to come back, though.
Yay. I'm sorry, I missed you. See.
Working caregivers like you to know about California's Day Family Leave.
Oh, she's trying to get a plug, y'all. She got the whole advertisement on the voicemail.
See, I took the phone, so that way I can do that. I should have grabbed that earlier.
That's all right, no problem. I'll just add that to my checklist of things, asking people if they've checked their home phone. That's just not something I've normally asked people. Is, did you check your home phone ringtone?
Oh no, right?
But you were saying that in the real world, sometimes it shows up as like, or is misidentified as a misbehaving child.
Or somebody who's disconnected, or someone who is like hyperactive. It has many different components to it.
Mm. So then how do you feel, especially being in like special education where you're dealing with children who have mental health issues? How do you see how do you compare your view to mental health when it comes to mental health behavior in the community versus society's view? Like, how do you feel like those views differ? Because I feel like society is a lot less educated when it comes to identifying mental health.
Society looks at it more like, I feel like I know within our community when I was growing up, it was like, oh, she needs to get her child under control, or that kid needs a whooping. And it's not necessarily that. Sometimes they need other things. Maybe you need to talk to them in a different manner. We can't just, oh, kids need to behave this way or the kids need to act this way. You can't talk to kids. Like, I know with certain kids, you can't look them in the eyes because that's a trigger. You have to understand a child's triggers or a person's triggers. It's not necessarily just a child. It's a person you're talking to, you're looking at. So that's how you have to look at them. They're a person. You have to, like how as adults, how we like to be addressed certain ways, we have to be able to address that person in a different way. You can't talk to people any way you feel like you can, no matter their age or their social class, because there's other things going on with them that they can't control.
Right. So you actually touch on something as far as kind of leading into the next question, but that one size fits all mentality where we just say, oh, well, when I was a kid, I got a whipping. So you a kid now, you about to get the same whipping, but not really looking at the the need of the child. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still an avid believer in whooping a kid or spanking a kid if it's necessary. But I've also, in my older and hopefully more wiser state, I've also realized that I can't give you like a spanking for everything. Like if you slam the car door, I can't give you a spanking for that. Not that I was given spankings for that, but if you have an accident, like a legitimate accidents legitimately happen. But one thing I did establish in my household was like, look, you lie, you get a touch up, hands down. Like I don't do the whole lying thing. So if you lie, touch up is coming. But if you tell the truth, let's talk about what happened and try to see if we can figure out what the solution needs to be. So I agree with that perspective of it's not a one size fit all mentality when it comes to dealing with mental health issues, because the varying, even when it comes to the types of mental health and the degrees that somebody may be severely or acutely struggling with mental health issues, it's like there's no way you can take a baseball bat and beat the same issue or beat every issue the exact same way. So with that, I want to ask the next question. How do you perceive that we as a society today attempt to address mental health issues?
I think people talk about it more. Like, I never heard of it when I was younger.
Right.
At all. It was like you would hear, oh, that's someone's crazy aunt, or that's so-and-so's crazy uncle. You would never, or like, oh, that baby's just special. It was never, nobody ever talked about it. Even as I got older, people never really talked about it. I really didn't understand it until it happened within my own family. So, or it was like a little incident that happened within my own family. So I feel like people are more willing to talk about it. They're more willing to address it. They're more accepting of it.
It brings it. Do you feel like talking about it brings it more to the light, to make it to where you can actually begin to identify it? Uh-oh. Did you just freeze on me? We having all kinds of connection issues today. Kristin. Okay, one moment while we get my host or my guest back on the line. This is like the equivalent of my entire day today. It's been a rough day today. And so this is like almost like a joyous moment of the continuation of the roughness. There you go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes. I think my phone was better last time.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry about it. I don't know what happened, but you froze for a little bit.
I think it's because the phone rang. But I cut the phone.
The phone rang. So I'm sorry, you were saying as a child, you didn't really hear about it. You heard, this is my special child, or this is my crazy aunt or crazy uncle, or whoever it may be. But it really wasn't talked about. And now you feel like it is talked about more. So what kind of traction do you feel like we're getting as a society being able to talk about it more?
I feel like with the help of the social media and the internet and just like the outlets that people have, they're expressing it. When you see somebody who is like, who was it? Kate Spade, when she committed suicide, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this, we need to talk about this more. It's epidemic. It's going on. And then it caused, I know a lot of my friends to be like, it's not just an epidemic. It's not just happening in those communities. It's happening in our communities. I actually suffer from it. So you actually hear people are willing to admit what they're personally dealing with at the same time. Because before it was, let me keep it to myself. But like, you know what? They're not alone. Or people want to know that they're not alone. So they're more willing to speak out.
Yeah, I think communication does bring, and this is going to sound so cliche, but I think communication brings validation of our issues sometimes, to where you hear other people talking about it and you're like, okay, now I'm not the only one. So it validates your experience. It validates your feelings and your struggles. This is a prime reason why I have First Row, of sharing stories, people's experiences, just so that we can all start to realize that, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not the only one who deals with this. I'm not the only one who's struggling with this, whether it's mental health issues, financial issues, marriage issues, relationships, whatever issue it may be. We all have some semblance of the same experience. They're just like little tweaks here and there that make them unique to us. But overall, our experiences as humans are about the same. I want to move on to my actually, before I move on to my next question, because you said you feel like as a society today, we talk about it more and it's more out in the open. Do you feel that just because it is out in the open, that we are actually actively pursuing solutions to the issue? Or do you feel like it's more like gossip, where we're just talking about it more? So now, you know, it'd be like if I was a drug addict, I could talk about, oh yeah, I'm using drugs, and now it's out in the open. It's not a secret, but I'm not trying to stop using drugs.
Well, I think there's different outlets. I feel like, I know within the music that my children listen to, they talk about it more. They talk more about the medications that they use to deal with those issues, but they also abuse them. So I can see both aspects of like, okay, let me just talk about it because this is what's going on and let me just express it. But when it comes to actually seeking the help and being strong enough to get better and to heal, I think we still have those types of responsible outlets. You just have to find them. It's just like with anything that you're dealing with.
Okay.
It's whatever you put yourself, what you surround yourself with.
Right.
So you can have friends that, yes, they have these certain mental illnesses and they're not dealing with them. And you're just in this group of people like saying, woe is me, woe is me. And then you have those who are like, look at me, I'm working at it every single day. I'm trying. You can overcome it. You're not alone. We're all in this together. Let's break the stigma. There's different groups, just like with anything.
Okay. I like that. And you're right. It is based on who you surround yourself with. Because if you listen to enough poison, or you have enough poison around you, whether or not you're ingesting it or not, it'll get into your system one way or the other. So the next question I want to ask you is, why do you think, and this is kind of a question based on my opinion, why do you think society treats mental health issues almost as if they're contagious, almost if like they're the kindergarten cooties? Why do you feel like there's this, I guess the way I would explain it is there's almost like maybe three sides, but two sides are pretty negative when it comes into mental health. This one side being, hey, I'm just going to ignore it. I don't see it. The other side being, I see it, but I'm going to do everything in my power to avoid it. And then there's the other side that actually says, okay, we see it, we acknowledge it, let's embrace it so that we can try to actually help it or heal it or nurture it or just help it get to a better place. Maybe not fix it, but get it to a better place. Why do you think that in society, from at least in my opinion, from society's standpoint, we treat mental health as the crazy aunt, crazy uncle, dismissive, and avoiding nature? Why do you think we do that?
Because then it's not necessarily a us problem. It's just a their problem.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Else. We kind of talked about in the beginning on how it's like, oh no, it's just the white people disease, or no, oh, it's just so and so has it. Because if they associate it with us, that means that we actually have it as well. We're facing it like it's not just them. It runs in our family, so maybe it'll happen to me too.
So just fear of, really, again, fear of contamination, fear of having that shared experience. Like, they'll ask, even in like counseling sessions, does this run in your family? Does that run in your family? They start asking all these things. And if you start acknowledging the mental health that's in your family, now you might have a
legitimate reason on why it's happening. Mm-hmm.
Like those are different things where I do think where you're right, where it's no, that's their problem. Though they're in my family, that's their problem. That's not our problem. That's theirs. See, I don't have those problems. I have different problems that are normal problems. So can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, I got a message saying the chat disconnected. I've never seen that before, but so I do agree with you there when it comes to the us problems versus the their problems, and people really don't want to make that their problem. What about the ignoring of and it's almost kind of like when we see homeless people today, and I say we because sometimes I still have this. I'm trying to get better about it. But typically when people see homeless people, they're like, oh, don't make eye contact. Oh, don't do this. Don't do that. All these rules of engagement to be dismissive of that person so that you're almost like not a part of their experience. And I think that sometimes can happen again with mental health, where we look at people and we're like, okay, they're walking a little off, or, they're not talking as clear as everybody else would talk, and all these different things that we judge based upon. And we say, okay, I don't want to engage with that person, or I don't want to acknowledge that person, because if I acknowledge that person, now I'm inviting them into my space. And if because of the what I perceive to be the outlook that the world that society has when it comes to mental health, we now have our reputation tarnished. So do you think that also plays a role of not just it being their problem and it not being our problem, but the fear of being associated with mental health, whether it's going to genetically come down your line or not, can also be seen as something that is taboo in our culture?
Definitely, because people look at it, it's just like if you're in a job situation, you want them to think like you're going into an interview and you want them to think everything is perfect, when you might have a whole lot of stuff going on in the background. You want to present yourself like, okay, I can handle this. I got this under control. When in reality, you have like a tornado in the background. You just don't, you want people to look at you and accept you.
Right.
For who you are, instead of what family members or what you have going on with your own self. Like, it's like if you have a visible disability, somebody's constantly asking you, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm fine once you stop asking me if I'm okay.
Right.
Are you okay? You just want to be looked at as normal. You want to be addressed as normal because you're a capable human being. Just because you have things going on does not make you less capable than the next person.
Right.
And I think they don't want to be viewed as different. It's just different when you can't see it.
So, question, because it's different when you can't see it, but I have family members in my family that I remember growing up around, cousins and aunts and all kinds of people that I grew up around that had mental health issues, that had disabilities, had all kinds of things and to some degrees, there were certain things that they couldn't do. Like I remember I had a cousin who had to wear a helmet, and there was just certain things like he couldn't be running around the same way we were running around and playing. That just was a limitation that he had. But he was one of like the happiest cousins I ever, like, probably to date. He's still probably one of my happiest cousins. Like, the dude is just always happy. I'm sure maybe he has times where he's sad just like everybody else, but for the most part, he is so freaking happy. And in ways, I am envious of his happiness. Like, I'm happy that he's happy, but I'm like, man, you don't got any struggles? Like,
but he does. It's his outlook. It's his outlook on it.
True. It is. It's his perspective. So for my next question, because I want to ask you, when it comes to, and a lot of this is about like the past, but the moving to the present, when it comes to like today's generation, how they handle mental health versus how we handled mental health in our generation and the generations before us. Do you feel, because I hear one of the things that I just seen a post yesterday about this, do you feel that today's generation is less equipped to handle mental health issues? And what I mean by that specifically is this: typically posts will say, oh, these kids are soft. These kids are, basically weak because they're not able to mask the mental health issues that they deal with the way that we were taught to mask our mental health issues. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's difficult only because they're faced with it more. It's more in their face. Yes, we may have had like our neighborhood friends or someone constantly get on us, but with them, they have the whole world. They have social media, which is like something we didn't have. Yeah, we might have had like, what was it? MySpace, but that was like when we graduated high school. So it wasn't really like stuff that was happening while we were growing up, like
right.
in middle school or elementary. Kids weren't saying like, oh, so-and-so has this problem, so-and-so has this problem, letting the whole world know, as opposed to like just your little friends in the neighborhood who seem like the whole world to us. Now it's out there for everybody to see. And it's like a timestamp, and people can go back years later and still review that same message or same information that person dealt with. They can't see our past.
Right. Thank God.
But they can't see that. And for our kids, they're constantly faced with these images of you're not good enough, or your life has to be perfect, or, it's the instant gratification. If they're not instantly getting that, they feel like, oh, I'm incompetent, or I'm not where I'm supposed to be. There's more insecurities. I see like they're faced with more people being the best instead of they don't see that person's struggle because they're faced with this facade.
Right.
And so they're constantly comparing their selves, which we didn't have to do. We just had to, oh, so-and-so's getting an A in class. Okay, there's like 2 or 3 kids I got to deal with. They're dealing with like, oh my gosh, there's this 16-year-old millionaire who made like all this money off of one YouTube post. Like it's a different time. Like, I don't know how, I just know for me, when I was growing up, like my parents were just like, okay, you got to just suck it up. Like, suck it up, buttercup. I was like the main, the suck it up, buttercup terminology.
Right. Here's a straw, buttercup.
Like, so, okay, and just deal with it. Or like, get up. Your problems ain't that big. You have no problems. Nothing's going on with you. And these kids are constantly facing it day after day. They're looking at images that are constantly put in their minds because that's what they're allowing themselves to see. So I don't know if they're soft or they just feel more pressure than we did.
Yeah, I could, in some areas, I'm going to be honest.
Sometimes I feel soft though, but sometimes, because I have to admit, because with my own children, I'm like, are you serious? Like, it's not that serious. You can get over it. You can overcome anything, because believe me, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's not going to matter.
Right.
But to them, that's all they see. So it's constant. So yeah, I do feel like some of it, I feel like they're soft, and you could get on me for saying that, because I've said it to my own kids. I've said it too, like, oh my gosh, that kid needs to toughen up, like, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. But in reality,
you realize there's pressures.
Yes, I had to come with the terms. Terms that yes, there is more pressures. I have my eyes opened, but you still gotta get over it one way or another. You can't let that define what's going on with you.
Right. No, and that's what I was gonna say. Transparency for me, like, there are some areas where I'm like, these kids are super snuggly. Like, come on, like let's tone down the fabric softener and get some hard water in your life, because there are certain things where I do feel like kids they kind of got certain things made that we didn't. Like, I mean, just the ability, they think their parents are going to take them. A lot of them think their parents are going to take them everywhere. I'm like, look, when I wanted to go somewhere, I had to walk or ride my bike. And then when my bike got stolen, I had to walk again. It wasn't like, oh, my bike got stolen, can you give me a ride to No, there were a couple rides. Don't get me wrong. I got a couple rides in some places, but for the most part, I was on the ones and the twos. So there's some areas where I do feel like today's society, children are soft. But I do absolutely acknowledge that also in today's society, there are some different levels of pressure. Like I had a pen pal when I was in elementary school. And if I wanted to tell him about something that happened this week in school, I had to write it down and mail it and wait a couple of days for him to get it, read it, and write back. So there's a long delay. And I don't think anybody is committed to continue to write back and forth 5 years later, 10 years later, how social media now has, oh, this is your memory from this day. This is your memory from this day. I don't think anybody's going to write back to me now from a 20-year ago memory of, I was in high school 20 years ago, 30 years memory. Jeez.
Age yourself.
Wow. That's where all this grade came from. But I don't think anybody's going to like write me from 30 years ago and say, oh, on this day, do you remember you wrote me about that? Whereas a lot of our children in today's generation, they don't have that luxury because digitally there's a footprint. And digitally, that footprint comes back. It's reoccurring. It's easily accessed. It's easy to go back and say, hey, let me look into this person's social media and see what they were saying 10 years ago. I actually do that with myself. I look at the beginning of my Facebook posts and I'm like, man, I used to talk about nothing, like nothing. And then I start looking at, as the years go on, my posts become a lot more mature and my thoughts become a lot more clear and accurate and articulate. Those are the things that come with age. And whereas that started for me, fortunately, after I got out of that early adolescent stage and was well on to the I forgot the board, whatever it's called, the springboard of adulthood. That's not our children in today's society. So I can acknowledge that. Let me bring a couple of things in from the chat really quick, because Sylvia London says, I have a friend who is bipolar, and it takes a long time for her to get comfortable enough to share that with anyone because she doesn't want to be looked at as quote unquote crazy, her words, or treated differently. What are your thoughts on that? And there's a question here I'll ask after, but what are your thoughts on that when we hide our mental disabilities, our mental illnesses, because of the fact we fear that judgment? What are your thoughts on that?
We do hide it because we don't want no one wants anybody to look at them differently. I mean, it just depends on how we're able to control it. If we're able to function and someone can look at us like, wow, I had no idea, then we might tend to become a little more comfortable in sharing it to break their stigmas of what it is. I think that's when we become more comfortable in discussing it with other people. I know I kept a lot of things quiet. Like I just learned things about myself that I didn't even realize. And I'm just like, okay, I'm coping with it. And by me coping with it, I'm actually being able to express it and share it with other people, because you realize that, hey, maybe I'm not alone and this is something I can talk to other people. But it's just like with anything, if you feel comfortable sharing what's going on in your life, there has to be some type of comfort space, because you can't just be like, hey, guess what? I'm bipolar, or right. Hey, I have anxiety, or this is going on with me. You can't just share that with anybody. You have to be comfortable with them. You have to have that comfort zone with anybody to share anything that's personal within your life. And that's just, I feel like that's when you're able to share anything. Doesn't matter. You wouldn't share it with a stranger on the street.
Right. You know, there's I think two sides, for me at least, two sides to that coin, because there is you wouldn't share all your business with a stranger on the street. That's typically, people don't do that. Some people do, but typically people in general don't do that. But then there's also, I think, it's almost like a person who gets in a relationship with somebody and they don't say something big. Like, to me, if we're in an intimate relationship and you're bipolar, that's something I should know before we get into that relationship, because I would rather, if I'm, let's say I'm the bipolar one, that's something you should know before we get into the relationship. And if that's the case, the reason I feel like you should know it is because what always is a concern for me is people trying to gain acceptance, but not present the whole picture. Do you know what I mean by that?
Exactly. Like I'm a single parent. So when I'm dating somebody or meeting somebody new, it's like, okay, yes, I do have 3 children, by the way. You know, I have this, by the way. This is what's going on with me. It's just because that's a huge part of my life. But if I don't know you from Adams and I'm just barely getting to know you, let's see, like first couple of dates or getting like a relationship, like you were talking about a relationship with someone and sharing that with that person. It's when you become like intimate with that person, either mentally intimate through conversation where you feel like it's getting a little deeper and you're like, hey, I do want to share this with you, because you're both determining if it's something that you want to get yourselves into. It's not like, okay, first 2 dates, guess what, I'm bipolar, or guess what, I have what's going on. You still have to find that comfort zone to see if that's somebody you even want to share or move forward with in a relationship. It's not something you just give freely.
Right. No, and that's why I say there's that balance of not sharing your business to everyone, but also you don't want to get overly invested or have somebody get overly invested and you have something that is a deal breaker for them, because we all come with our own experiences. We all come with our own baggage. You just want to make sure, I think there's finding the right balance for yourself and the right cadence for you is important, but never confuse the fact that you're holding something like, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be mental illness, be anything. 1 second. I got to put somebody on timeout because I don't have the ability. Boop. There you go. To the wall, Grinch. But there's a difference between like I said, having that something that you're holding back and then thinking that you're gaining acceptance, and then either what you've been holding back or hiding slips out, and now they're like, what the heck? Where's this all coming from? What are you doing? Or it doesn't slip out and you end up with a situation where it's like, okay, well, I didn't know that was coming, and now I need to reset on what I think our relationship is going to be. So I think there's a balance, but I also agree with you. There's just not that, oh, this is who I am. Let me introduce myself. My name is Billy. I have 3 kids, and this is what I've been. I've been married. I've been divorced. These are the things that I'm like. That's way too much information going on from the very beginning. So I like that thought process of just having that balance and making sure that you're being accepted for who you are. And if you have a mental illness, that is a part of who you are. You might be working through it. You might be fighting through it. You might be struggling through it. You might be failing through it at some point. But that is a part of who you are, and definitely make sure you're being accepted for who you are in your entirety. You shouldn't have to leave any of you behind. So there was a question in the chat. Let me go up so I can ask you this question. I can't see it, unfortunately.
I think I see it.
Oh, there we go. It's a question from Damian Rowe. You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Says, do you think that mental health education in today's modern day society should be more talked about in the workplace? If so, what can the cons be if it goes ignored?
That's you usually mainly talk about that with your HR department. It's not like, oh, let me tell all my coworkers that this is what's going on with me. No, like sometimes depending on what mental illness you're dealing with, you might have to take some time to get hospitalized to deal with what's going on with you. And that's when you would want to discuss it with your job, but you don't have to disclose so much information. You just need to let them know you're taking a break. Because if you notice, a lot of the times, a lot of people are taking, what is it called? I can't even remember.
FMLA?
Yeah. Well, not just FMLA, but they're taking like a leave of absence, but they're not disclosing the reason why they're taking a leave of absence. And a lot of them are people who are dealing with a lot of stress at work. A lot of people tend to like leave of absences for that, but then they have to seek counseling in order to be able to deal with what's going on with them. There's different forms of mental illness. We see it every day, but we're just not addressing it vocally. I think self-care should be addressed in the workplaces, because a lot of people work themselves so hard that they're not focusing on what the main thing is. And that's like being able to take care of yourself means you're able to take care of everything else around you. And I think if they focus more on self-care, like bosses not saying, oh no, you have to meet these deadlines. But if you don't have happy coworkers or happy employees or people who feel like the company's worth it, you're not going to, stress leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's a form of mental illness.
Right.
It's something you're mentally dealing with. You can't handle it. So therefore you need to take a leave of absence. And I feel like with self-care and promoting like positive work environments, that's how workplaces can address it better.
Right. And, it's funny because I work for an organization that, at least in my team, and I think across the organization, it is phenomenal at really trying to make sure the employees are happy. Now, obviously, you can't please everybody. You can't make everybody happy because some things that people want are just unrealistic. But I remember when I first moved here that it was during the holidays. As a matter of fact, it was in November that I moved here. And that was going to be the first holiday that I didn't spend with my family. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, all right, I guess, I'm out here. And I remember my supervisor coming to me and saying, hey, I was talking to my boss, which is obviously my boss's boss. And she was like, she's wondering where you're going to spend Thanksgiving at. And it was like, I had never worked for an organization that even cared whether I had food for Thanksgiving, let alone if I was going to be spending it with family or not. And so having that experience where they were like, okay, you don't have any place that you're going to go to because you don't know anybody out here. Why don't you take some time to go back home and spend Thanksgiving with your family, and then you can come back and we'll get back to work. And I just thought that like really showed me the value that they seen in me for my own self-care, to make sure that it's not like, oh, because it's easy to get into a habit where, oh, the holidays are here and I'm still away from my family. Now I'm depressed during the holidays. Now my energy goes down, my work performance goes down, my everything just goes down because it's turning that time of the year where I'm not going to be around my family. And they completely just said, let's just take care of that on the forefront. Hey, it's the holidays. Go and spend that time with your family. Maybe you won't go back for Christmas, or maybe you will, but let's make sure the first holiday that you have the opportunity to spend with your family, we don't disrupt that. And I thought that was a phenomenal thing. And I actually picked up a book here. It's called The Happiness Advantage, because it talks very much about having happy workers in your business, because those are going to be your most productive people. Happy employees have been proven to be more effective and productive than your negative, unhappy workers. There's a couple other things. Let's catch up the chat and then we'll jump back into the questions. I hope that answered your question, Damien.
No.
Oh, okay.
I was reading too.
Jessica. Hey, Jessica. It says, I found it hard to even tell my husband that mental illness runs in my family. Ooh, I think that goes back to the shame. Let's talk about that a little bit. That shame of being associated with mental illness. What are your thoughts about that? You already said that their problem versus it being our problem or us problem. But what are your thoughts about that shame that really pushes us to hide our mental health? What do you think is the impact of that?
I've experienced that just recently,
Okay.
where I honestly didn't know it ran in my family. So I was going to say, oh no, that's just on so-and-so's side. That's not on my side. That going into doctor's appointment, you're like, no, that has nothing to do with my side. That's completely the other person's side. Mm-hmm. It's like finding something that's wrong with you and looking at yourself, like saying, hey, oh my gosh, this is me too. Coming to find out by discussing it openly and saying, okay, like asking questions, like, are you sure you've never seen this in so-and-so? Or, I'm noticing little things more so now as an adult. Because even my mother would tell you, when I'd ask her, she was like, that does not run in our family whatsoever. Mm-hmm. If you have asked her a year ago, asking her present day, like, no, seriously, if you asked her a year ago, no, not in our family, never, no one in our family, and no one's ever brought it up, but like, at least I don't think so. Now it's, oh yeah, did you know so-and-so, Mija, did you know so-and-so's family is dealing with this? Or did you know your cousin has this? Or do you know, it's like, okay, you're not alone, because now you're able to open up and talk about it. But yeah, I definitely felt the shame, because I was like, definitely not me. It's not my family. No, nobody in my family has it.
Right.
But again, I did have the crazy Uncle Tony, like you have those members of your family, but never your family. Like, that's not our family. That's not how. So it's not. Why would you ever say that?
Right.
So and I completely understand, because I didn't think it was in my family. So knowing, I feel like I'm able to talk about it more easily than I was before, because now I'm accepting of it. And so it's just being able to accept what the reality is, knowing that it's not who you personally are. It's just something that's going on around you.
Right. I think that speaks also again to that generation difference, because it's like the same people that you were having all these conversations with, they were like, oh no, that's not anything we have to worry about. Don't worry about it. It's not us. And now because there's more conversations around it, it's being identified like, oh, well, maybe a couple of those things are us. Because I mean, I already know you'll see, and if you really want to know somebody's denial level, let them look at their kid and see something negative. They're like, oh, you must get that from your daddy's side, or you must get it from your mama's side.
Exactly.
Like, really? So nothing crazy came from your side? And I remember even growing up, like, I was always like, yeah, my dad's side of the family, we got some hotheads on that side. And legitimately, we do got some hotheads on that side of the family. But when I started having deeper conversations with the elders on my mother's side of the family, I was like, oh, y'all got some of the same issues. So I got it on both sides. Got it. Because, everybody's always, oh, no, that's not our side of the family. That's your daddy's side. That's your mama's side. But really, when you start having these open conversations and you start listening to the stories, that's why I think it's so critical to speak to like your elders. When you listen to these older stories and you're like, oh, so they have PTSD. Okay. Or PSTD. Is it PSTD or no? PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes. I was like, PTSD, SDT. I don't know.
No, there's a lot more than I even knew of.
Oh yeah. That's one of the reasons, even when it comes to like just mental illnesses, the categories and the names of them, that's one of the reasons why on the share for this particular Intersation, I created on the page that I put up the circle of all these different types of disorders, because we get very lazy in the human English language where we will just call everything crazy. Oh, they're crazy. Oh, they're crazy. Like everything. You depressed? You're crazy. You sad? You crazy. Like everything falls under this generic general categorization of crazy, when there's much more varying levels, and the complexity of the solution is not simply, oh, we'll give you the crazy solution, which is why you have some people who are receiving medication who don't need medication, they need counseling, or they don't need counseling, they need medication, because you generalize. Right. And some of them need a combo pack. So
the most effective therapy is when you're utilizing both of them. It's not when you're just dealing with one. Sometimes you can just deal with the counseling portion of it. And sometimes you realize that no matter what counseling you've done, or what diet things you've changed, or what physical things that you've done to help improve those things, sometimes there is a chemical imbalance, and sometimes medication does need to be taken in order to be more effective. But the medication is not going to be your resolution. You have to be an active participant within it as well. Sorry, I got all deep or positive, or like my tone changed, but yeah, it definitely takes both of them that I've seen.
Right. No, that I do agree with you on that. It some of them, like you said, it takes a combination approach. But look, there is no magical pill. Like I don't care if it's an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety. There is no magic pill, and it's interesting because. To go into what Damien is talking about, my question was based on the education of identifying how mental illness can present itself amongst coworkers. I think in the environment in which I work in, at least, there's a lot of open dialogue about life, about things that people are experiencing. Like I found out that one of the people that I work with, their relative was involved in like some big media thing that I had no idea about, because I don't watch the news like that, but some big media thing that they were exposed in. And it was like, wow, like that person felt comfortable enough to say, yeah, that's my relative, like my blood relative, not like a third cousin twice removed relative. And then I also had another coworker who was telling me that they just were having problems breathing and chest pains, and they were really worried about it and didn't know what it was. And it turned out to be an anxiety attack. Like, and I mean, I've never had an anxiety attack that I know of. I've had some temper tantrums that turned into asthma attacks, but but I've never had an anxiety attack before. So it was just like to have that level of comfort. Sometimes it's not about necessarily identifying Sometimes it's just a matter of asking your coworker if they're okay today. Hey, how you feeling today? You good? You all right? And you'd be surprised that people who are hurting, like really significantly hurting and don't know what to do and may need some help, you'd be surprised. Sometimes you say, hey, is everything straight? And they're like,
no,
I'm in a bad spot. And you're like, whoa, I wasn't ready for that. I thought we were just going to say good morning, have a good day. But now they're opening up to you, so that it may not always be about identifying where your coworker's mental health state is at, because if you're not a professional, you might misdiagnose it every single time or genuinely put it into that's my crazy coworker. But but if you have the ability, that's what happens. If you have the ability to ask, how is your day going? Is everything okay? Are you straight? Are you good? Then maybe you'll open up that dialogue or create that space that you were talking about earlier, Kristin, about that safety where they're comfortable enough with you to say, yeah, this is too much for me to handle on my own. Let me try to give some of this to somebody else to help me process it. Catching the rest of the way up, I got Sylvia London. Hey, let's see. I've seen many patients take stress leave from work. Yep, patients take stress leaves from work. I think it's a lot more common than it used to be. Yeah, I absolutely agree on that. And then Brian, what's going on, cousin Brian? Most employers / states have programs to help people deal with mental illness in private, so relationships and employment isn't jeopardized. At Damian Rowe, so educating employees on mental health. I think that's what he was saying, Sylvia. Tabitha, welcome, Tabitha. Yes, intergenerational trauma too. Absolutely. Because some of that stuff we pour into our own kids. I know I'm guilty. And then
stop that by working on it and having open discussions, because we can talk about what our first reaction was, and then us going along with it. True.
Then Jessica says, my father lived with PTSD his entire life from the military. And Damien, I don't know what you're laughing at. I know it's not what she just said.
Probably the crazy coworker thing. I think he's laughing at that.
Okay. And then True and hey Tab. All right, so we are caught up, man. Let me ask you the next question, because I feel like we are 52 minutes in and we got a couple more questions that I really want to get to that you're gonna have to answer.
You had a whole slew of questions. I was like, okay.
So from the adolescent standpoint, because a lot of the mental illness that I had to deal with and overcome was in my adolescent years. I don't really think I have too much to overcome in my adult years. I feel like I'm pretty balanced out. Knock on some kind of wood. But in your opinion, do you think that as adolescents or during our adolescent years, where our hormones are changing, our bodies are changing, everything is changing, that there is some degree of mental illness for almost all of us during our adolescent years?
I think for some it's more than most, only because your body's constantly changing. Like, chemical makeup of your body's changing. So sometimes that's when they actually come up. I know sometimes for younger girls, it's when their menstrual cycle starts happening. Sometimes they actually have like this this thing where it's like their they have like this menstrual depression. Because you're dealing with all these emotions, and sometimes it's a little higher during that period of time. It's not common for everybody, but it does hit some young women at that age. I know for the younger boys, I know it's usually around like 10, 11, or 12, that when their bodies are changing, when they're going through all these hormonal changes, they're not used to it. And so they do have this slight form of these different types of symptoms. And it's just being able for them to be able to talk about it, or some of them get through it and some of them don't. So I think it hits at different moments. I'm just describing on what I've actually seen personally. Okay. Within adolescence, what I've seen within my district, within the school system, and the more things that I'm seeing as I go into different departments, you see different aspects of, or different behaviors that you wouldn't normally see, and you see it at these different hormonal stages of kids' lives. So I think it does affect it in some type of way.
When do you think that roller coaster begins to even out? if it does even out. Sometimes it can get worse, I'm gonna be honest.
Sometimes it gets worse and sometimes it doesn't. I think it's all on how you approach it. Because if you let it go, it's just like any behavior. If we're not willing to work on it, or I wouldn't necessarily say correct it, but to address it, I think addressing it instead of correcting it is a better terminology.
Okay.
Having open discussions, being able for them to understand what's going on with them, talking about it. Because some kids are able to suppress it and move on. Some kids suppress it and it constantly builds and builds and builds and builds until it explodes. So it's just knowing your audience, who you're talking to. Like when I said in the beginning, like having a conversation with an adult, you can't just talk to them in a certain way. They're a person. So we have to look at these kids or these adolescents like they are a person. Yes, they do have the right to feel how they feel, but they also need to be respectful in their approach. And we have to address it in a different way.
So I like when you say address versus correct, because that's really what it is. Like, I don't think that you can, unless you have the ability to go in and surgically change somebody's brain, which we're not going to go into the history of where lobotomy was a potential solution to mental illness. I think that addressing concept is really, really critical, and it's important. And it also plays a role in my next question, because I do feel like in the minority community, and I don't know if it's in like the majority or like in the white American community, but in the minority community, I feel like there is a lack of, I don't want to say desire, a lack of, I don't know what word I want to use, but there's a lack of initiative to, what word did you say?
I said empathy.
Empathy, sympathy, initiative, anything. there's a lack when it comes to dealing with mental health. And my question to you would be, why do you think in the minority community there is this, I guess, a lack of willingness to seek like professional help, that whole, don't share the family's business type mentality? Why do you think there is that? And most specifically in the minority community?
Because we're all trying to be accepted. We're already dealing with so many other aspects of this world. We're already, our children are looked at as less than already. That's how we feel. So why give us another label? We just want to be looked at as just regular people. We don't want to be categorized in this one little box. They already categorize us. They already separate us when we're having to check our ethnicity in these little boxes when we're applying for school or for a job. We're already put in a box. Why do they have to constantly put us in these little other boxes for them to continuously judge us? We're tired of being judged, and that's just another thing for them to look at as what they consider as a weakness, or another thing that they can say, oh, you're not qualified because this is what's going on with you. We already have the racial barrier. Why do we have to create another barrier? So we need to follow this straight line as much as we possibly can.
Okay.
We need to be able to fit in within society as much as we possibly can. So maybe and that's the only way I can think of it. I know within my own family, that's how it has been. Like, why give them another reason to look at us differently?
Got it. Now, so the question is, the next question would be to that then is, in the fear of being looked at differently and not seeking the help professionally that we may need, how does that then bleed over and into our communities?
The intergenerational trauma. Tabitha hit it right on the money, because it's like because we're never healing. When you never address something, how are you able to heal? It's like when you have an argument with your spouse or your significant other, and they keep doing these things that are constantly ticking away at you, and you never address it. It's going to lead on to your next relationship. It's constantly going to just continually grow into this ball, and it's going to take something significant in order for you to address it and talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually agree with that, because just because you ignore it and just because you don't get the help that you don't want to bust your business out or create another label, then you do end up with that intergenerational trauma where you're now in a place where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to function tomorrow because of the fact that I don't have the tools to function. Like, I don't have the coping mechanisms. I don't have the encouragement. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the patience and the peace. I don't have anything that's going to help me cope with tomorrow. So therefore, I'm just going to avoid it. I'm just going to sit in my bedroom all day, or I'm going to sleep all day, or do whatever I can do to avoid the experience. And I do think you're right. That does end up with an intergenerational trauma, especially if you have children. Now you haven't dealt with these issues. And because you haven't effectively dealt with these issues, now you're not dealing with those issues that your children are having, because you're like, well, if I help you with your issue, that means I got to address my issue first. And I don't want to address my issue.
I ain't want all that. I'm not ready.
Look, I had you, I brought you into this world, but I didn't say I was going to do all that. So
it becomes their issue once again. Okay, that's your issue. You the one who needs help. I'm good over here.
You better get good at ignoring it like I did. Yeah, right. Exactly. Tabitha says acknowledgement.
Your own issues up on them.
Right. Tabitha says that acknowledgement, that is actually deep. Acknowledgement. Absolutely. Let's move to the next question. So for you, in your opinion, I don't know how much you know about this particular topic, but about emotional intelligence, what part do you think that emotional intelligence can play in addressing mental health issues, whether we're self-addressing, self-nurture, or we're addressing them externally in somebody else's mental health issue?
No, emotional intelligence, like knowing where your emotions are at each stage.
Correct.
I think it helps a lot if you're able to actually acknowledge your own emotions. You can kind of create those own barriers for yourself and know when you're going to hit that iceberg, like something's about to happen, like, okay, I need to step back. Let me self-evaluate. This is when your coping skills take into place. If you're able to do that, to me, that's emotional intelligence. You're understanding what's going to happen next if you go this way or if you go that way. So, like, I know it really has to do with your coping skills and being able to address those types of things. Like, if I know, like, okay, I know with myself, like, if I don't have a plan, or I know what's going to happen, if I'm not front loaded with certain things, or if I don't have like a backup plan, I am not going to be comfortable. I know that I can't put myself in that situation because I don't want to ask a person, okay, do you have this right? 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 Because then I become extremely stressed out and I can't deal with it. So I try to remove myself from those situations and try to, like, okay, Kristin, okay, if they don't have that, what can you do in order to be able to deal with what you have to deal with? Get through the day how you need to get through, because whatever they're doing, it can affect what you have going on here.
I think you actually just brought something very meaningful into the conversation when it comes to mental health, about front-loading solutions that work for you, because we are all different. That front-loading aspect, that proactivity of protecting your mental space is something that is critical. And a lot of people don't get that about me, where like, oh man, you seem very non-emotional. And before, I used to be a non-emotional person where it's like, I'm not going to show my hand. Nobody's going to know what I'm feeling. You'll never be able to hurt me, all these different things. And now that non-emotional state has been that the language that goes on in my head is so much different. It's like, it's not that big. It's not the end of the world. Everything's okay. Nobody's safety is being jeopardized. We're good. And so they're like, man, you're not panicking about this. And I'm like, no, because part of that mental health, or mental, protection of my mental health is, I've had shingles before, and it came because I was overly stressed out, and I don't ever want to have shingles ever again. So I have committed to not being overly stressed out. And even when something is off, like this past week, something has been like mentally off with me, where I'm like, there's something going on in there. It's rattling around. I can hear it rattling around, but I can't find out where that noise is coming from. And when I took some time to actually step back and think about it, what it was this particular topic that we were going to be talking about this week, about mental health, because I know the adolescent Billy and the young child Billy who went through a lot of mental health issues and a lot of behavioral issues. And I think sometimes people confuse mental health and behavioral issues. But I know what I went through. And so as I start to reflect and revisit some of those things, like it's something that it's not that I haven't addressed it. It's just something that kind of wears on the mind to say, oh, we're revisiting some of those deeper pains that we haven't revisited in a while. Fortunately, we've resolved them, but we haven't revisited them in a while. And my mind knew, it was like, oh, this is the topic you chose. Okay, well, we're going to be talking about these things. Some of these things are going to come up.
We're addressing it.
Right? So because we're addressing it, it's like, oh, my mind starts trying to strategically position itself for avoidance. And I'm like, no, there's nothing to avoid. It's okay. We're in a safe place. There's nothing to worry about. It's not the biggest thing that you've ever done, and it's not the end of the world. And so reassuring myself, that front loading, that everything is going to be okay. You're going to have the conversation. It's going to be like every other interstation. Just focus on the growth. That is what has helped me nurture me back to the place where I'm not so clouded and a little distorted mentally or distracted mentally. So I want to bring one more thing in, and I got a couple more questions I want to ask you before we begin to wrap. Brian Sr. says, at what point do we sufficiently acknowledge mental illness before it is addressed? I understand not feeling different, but those struggling with mental illness are different, not alone, but different. Okay. Not reconciling the feelings or being different delays being able to address mental illnesses. And shifts the illness from generation to generation. I agree. That's the avoidance aspect of it. What are your thoughts on that question? Uh-oh. Are you frozen again? Girl, you got to stop freezing on me. Kristin, we got to give her another commercial break to come back. Well, I'll start answering the question, and then when she comes back, we'll let her answer that question, Cousin Brian. So at what point do we sufficiently acknowledge mental illness before it is addressed? I think, in my opinion, I think that we acknowledge mental illness as immediately as we can possibly acknowledge it. And the reason being is because for every day that you don't acknowledge it, it gets easier to become that's their problem now because I didn't acknowledge it when I seen it. So now that's their problem. I'm actually dealing with some mental health things right now that I could easily say, well, these are not my problems. And, these are their problems that they have to deal with. But seeing it, the first way that I addressed it was not, oh, well, let's go and get you the help you need, because I understand from my own experiences with mental health that just acknowledging it and saying, oh, well, you need to get help and I'm going to take you to the help doesn't necessarily lead to the solution. It doesn't necessarily lead to the mental health being addressed. No. Because if you reluctantly take somebody who has a mental health issue to try to get the help that they need, even if you can see it, it's probably not going to be received, and it's probably not going to gain the traction that's necessary to overcome the mental health issue. So one of the biggest things with me is I'm always asking people like, hey, I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Here are some of the things that I see with that. I'm not a professional qualified to deal with that. But my first question before we even start bringing professionals into the table or trying to get plans of actions written out as blueprints is, are you ready to do the work? Because I understand what it is to be depressed. I literally, when I went through my first divorce, my routine was this. I would wake up in the morning to no alarm. I'd get up, get dressed, go to work all day, come home, sit on the edge of the couch. The sun would go down. I wasn't watching TV, wasn't doing anything. I would literally sit on the edge of the couch doing nothing. And then eventually when I got tired enough, I'd just fall over on the couch, go to sleep, wake up again without any alarm, get up, go to work, do my job, come back home, sit on the same edge of the couch. And that was my routine for like a month and a half. I wasn't worried about eating dinner. I wasn't worried about like doing something exciting. I wasn't worried about playing video games. I literally sat on the edge of a couch and then just would go to sleep. And at some point, fortunately, I had people who cared about me. But even beyond that, at some point I said, okay, do you want to just wither away on this armrest of this couch, or do you want to do some work? Because you're going to have to do some work. And I remember going to this is crazy. So I was separated at the time, but I was getting ready to head to divorce, and I went to marital counseling. Now we had already separated, and I really wanted my ex-wife to come with me, but she didn't want to come. And so I said, okay, well, I'm just going to have to go to this marital counseling by myself. And I went to marital counseling by myself for about like 8 sessions. And I remember thinking like in the beginning, like, dang, this is kind of dumb to be here trying to do some marital counseling and the wife ain't even here. So why am I doing this? But when I started to really like embrace and engage with that counseling, it became a matter of you're doing this because you're choosing to not sit on the edge of that couch and not approach or address the actual issue, which is a mental health depression issue that you're experiencing. So you're doing this to get the tools that you need so that when you go home, sitting on the couch is not the thing that you choose to do with your life for the rest of your life. So what for you were frozen when this question was asked. Did you see the question that Brian Sr. asked?
Not reconciling the feelings of being different.
Sorry. Before that. At what point? Yeah. At what point do we significantly acknowledge that?
I understand not feeling different, but those struggling with mental illness are different, not alone, but different. We're all different. Like, nobody is the same. Like, we all have different things that we deal with. We all react to things differently. So when you say we're all different, or there people who have mental illnesses are different, they just have something else going on with them that we don't have, that we probably don't understand. And just because someone is depressed, they can meet somebody else who has depression, and they have different types of depression. It shows themselves in different ways. So no matter what it is, like, nobody's symptoms are exactly the same. They're just similar. That's why not one medication works for everybody. That's why people have to go through different medications combinations to see if it's something that will even work for them, because what works for Joe doesn't work for like Peter or Paul. You know what I mean? So I feel like we're all different, and no matter what, like, sometimes we have different backgrounds, we have different, like, just different ways of how we handle things, how we raise our families. Everybody is different. So just saying you're different because you have a mental illness doesn't.
It's still a different. It's just a different. It's a different. That's all.
Thank you. Like, it's just something, another thing that we have to say we're different for.
That and I can see where you're coming from with that, from the perspective of, regardless, even if we were all 100% mentally available, like no mental illness whatsoever, because of the variances in each individual, we would still all be considered different. If I'm understanding, I think where he's saying is, I understand not feeling different, but those struggling with mental illness are different. They're just struggling with something different. There's those of us who are struggling with financial debt. There's those of us who are struggling with finding gainful employment or making a living wage. We're just all dealing with different things. Excuse me. But they're not alone, not just because of the mental illness, but they're not alone because they're not the only one who has a struggle. And I think sometimes, going back to that soft nature of this generation, I think that sometimes it becomes, man, I really don't want to say that term. It becomes I gotta find a different term to say. It's not a really good term to use.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Sometimes it becomes a competition between who has a struggle, like who's struggling the most. And it's like, if you really think of the logic behind that, it's like, why would you want to win the competition of who has the harder struggle? Like, I want to lose that. If anything, I want to have the least struggle possible. I mean, definitely don't get me wrong. I want to grow. I want to expand and gain wisdom through experiences, but I don't want to have the hardest struggle. I would be happy to grow and have all those wonderful things with the least resistance possible. So I think that's where that they're different versus we're different and everybody's different. I think that's where sometimes we get caught in the noise of trying to be the one who wins or who's the king or the queen of the mountain on struggle. Like, I'm not interested in being the king of that mountain. Y'all can have it. I'll stay in the bottom.
Point.
Yeah. You said what?
It's like we're missing the point. It's everybody's dealing with something. It's just this happens to be what they're dealing with.
Right.
Like, you may have cancer. Like, you can't control that. Somebody who has a mental illness cannot control that as much as they would love to, because trust me, they would love to be able to wake up and not have to deal with what they're dealing with, the struggle inside that we can't see. They would love to wake up and not deal with that. Like the person who is just diagnosed with cancer, they would love to wake up and say, hey, you're cancer free. But guess what? The reality of it is that this is what they have to deal with. This is what they have to deal with day in, day out. They're waking up. They have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, how am I going to get through my day?
Right. That's true. So let's move to the next question. My gosh, I don't know why time feels like it's flying right now, but let's move to the next question. I got like 2 more questions I'm going to ask you. For those who are watching live, for those who are watching live, as we begin to wrap, if you can start to share what your takeaway is from tonight's conversation, just type it in the chat. I definitely want to share some of those in the live video while we're still on live. But some of the takeaways that you're getting from tonight's conversations, or the things that maybe we didn't get to that you want to add to the conversation, I definitely would be happy to share that with us live before we close out tonight. But for you, Kristin, the next question that I have for you is really from a more personal perspective. What experiences have you had in dealing with mental health, whether it be for yourself directly or indirectly?
Well, honestly, almost about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, my child was hospitalized for depression. And it's not something that I saw coming. I thought that we could, okay, they're not actively participating in school. This is a child who loves school, who loves to overachieve. And first thing I noticed was grades dropping. And so I was like, okay, something's going on. When I would address it, they were very non-responsive about it. They had no desires to do certain things. And to me, that was, okay, if you're not going to talk to me, you're going to talk to somebody. But it's not going to work if you're not actively participating.
Right.
And so even though I didn't know what it was, I just thought okay, maybe you need someone to talk to. Maybe I'm just too strict. And it might be easier for you to talk to somebody else. Because I grew up with that mentality, okay, suck it up. Your life ain't that hard. Come on, all you got to do is go to school. You got a roof over your head.
Right.
Walk to school. I drive you to school. What problems do you really have? So I know if they probably couldn't talk to me, that maybe there's somebody else that you can talk to. And constantly going to sessions and having them talk to someone, certain things I thought were getting better, like grades were starting to improve and things like that. But then, you have that fateful day when your whole life stops, everything changes. And that's when you realize that it becomes, this is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
It knocks you completely down. It's just like when you have a family member who's diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. You don't know how they got it. You don't know where it's coming from. You're trying to doctors are asking you questions and you don't have any answers. So that's how it was for me. I didn't have any answers. I was that person who was deferring it off oh, that must come from your daddy's side or this side, because it sure ain't on my side. I don't even know. So, but I had to become an active member in the healing process as well, because it stopped my world. I had to look at how it affected my other children at the same time, but also how it was affecting my own child that was going through it. It was something that they couldn't express because sometimes what I've realized is somebody who is dealing with a mental illness doesn't quite understanding what's going on within themselves. They can't describe it to you because they don't know. They're trying to figure it out just like you're trying to figure it out.
Right.
But if they're not in the denial stage, if they're willing to get the help that they need and they realize that it's not something that they can control, that's where you see light. That's where you see the progress. And that's how I became more educated on the topic. I had to address it. I knew I was addressing something, but I really wasn't addressing it. I was just trying to okay, maybe I can cover it up. I can sugarcoat it by just saying okay, let's go and try this. Maybe that'll just work it out. Not putting a name to it, but once that name was placed on it, that's when the reality hit me.
Mm.
And that's when I was let me read on this. How does this happen? What foods can I give my child? Because I'm not really big on medication. I believe that if you feed your mind, body, and soul, with nothing but good things, then you become good. You heal.
Mm-hmm.
And when feeding her great foods wasn't working, when having her go to a yoga class, you go to yoga class, I'm out of that yoga class like, oh my goodness, I feel relief. I feel like all this weight has been lifted off of my shoulders. And I ask her, like, how's it going? She's like, I didn't feel nothing. Like, how did you not feel anything?
That touched my soul, and you over here feeling nothing.
Like, I feel free. I feel peace, and I feel serenity, and you feel nothing. I mean, they weren't capable to do so at that time. So sometimes, like I said, like, it can't just, sometimes you could go the counseling round, that's enough, but sometimes it's not enough, because there is underlying things that we don't understand. And when we're almost coming up to the year anniversary of when she was released from the hospital, so it's like coming through that, and the growth that she's had within this past year is tremendous. I've taken classes, I've talked to other parents, I've talked to other people. My family has become more understanding. We've had more open conversations about it, because, like I told you, if you had asked us a year ago, that's not in our family. That's not in this. Right. Come to find out, I have cousins who have dealt with it. I have family members who have been hospitalized, but no one had ever talked about it because they didn't want to feel the shame. They didn't want to be judged. They didn't want to be looked at as different.
Right.
But my thing is, if I would have known, I could have asked you, how are you able to get through?
Right.
How are you able to cope? What are you using to cope and get through these things? It's just like when someone, like I keep saying cancer, because cancer does run in my family. But when you have someone that has cancer, you're trying to figure out every way possible for them to heal.
Right. How can we beat this?
Look at this the same way? Why don't we look at it the same way? Do we feel shame because someone has cancer in our family? No, we're like, okay, we're doing walks. We're doing research on it all around the world. There's Susan G. Komen walks. I just did the relay. We had Relay for Life, like last weekend. People are raising money to figure out what's going on, because there's awareness.
Right. I think it's interesting.
We don't have awareness in our communities. There's no awareness. Half of the drug abuse that we have in our communities stems from mental illness, because people are trying to feel something because they're unable to do so.
Right.
So when you see the little strung out person along the way in the hood, guess what? They're dealing with something that they can't control, because no one has ever addressed it. No one has taught them coping skills in order to address these issues. We can probably eliminate so many things within our communities and our hoods and our just within our own families if we find out coping skills. We can eliminate the intergenerational trauma. And that's all I'm trying to do. And it took my own child for me to come to this realization, which is sad. I look at it now as sad. Like, I wish I would have known earlier, because I would have been better prepared and saw the signs earlier and been able to stop earlier.
Right.
I could have seen it early, and I could have kind of prevented some things that have happened, because I saw it. I was more aware. I was educated on it. And I'm not going to, it's not a weakness, because if somebody's willing to change and grow from it, that takes strength.
Correct.
So we can say, yes, our youth, they're soft or this. They're more open and willing to talk about it. That shows their strength, if they're willing to get through it. Right. Now, if you're going to sit there and complain about, like we were saying, like, oh, let me just take drugs and I'll numb the pain and not really deal with the issue, that's the weakness. That's the soft part. You need to get over yourself.
Right. And that's in every generation, by the way.
That's in every generation. Every generation. It's what you surround yourself. But if you're dealing with people that are coping, that are learning, they're learning coping skills, because that's what it takes in order to get through anything in life. So it's not necessarily a mental illness as you look at it as a weakness, because it's not a weakness. It's something that people cannot control, because believe me, they try to and they can't.
Right.
And I mean, it took my parents my own parents had that, like, oh, well, I don't understand why this is happening. How do you, like, they have everything they need. Like the same thing I thought, like you have food, you have a shelter, you have people who love you. Like, why isn't that enough?
Because it's not.
And they're looking at you like, I don't know. So I've learned so many different things by I've had to take time off of work. Yes, it was a struggle, but my main thing was making sure that my child was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you said like somebody had a anxiety attack, I thought I was having a heart attack one time. I went to the doctors. They checked all of my vitals. I was fine. I had to take a stress test. I was like, I don't understand what's going on with me. I have anxiety. Had no idea. Now I know, like when we were talking about the emotional intelligence, I know what I can handle.
Right.
I know what I can't handle. You have to learn things about yourself in order to deal with things. That doesn't necessarily make you weak. You just have to be able, if you have knowledge, you're able to grow and learn. Ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is power.
All right.
Sorry. I got on a
No. I really thank you for being transparent and sharing that experience. I'm all for, like I said, people sharing their stories. And sometimes, like you said, it takes a personal situation to really bring something to the light for people. It's like people are ignorant and they feel that blissful ignorance until something comes into that ignorance and says, oh, I'm going to completely disrupt all of that. All that you're doing, I'll mess all that up. Don't worry about it. So I appreciate you being transparent, and also the aspect of when you're talking. One of the things I wrote down was when you're addressing mental health issues, you got to ask yourself, when you're trying to help somebody else address mental health issues, you got to ask yourself what you're looking to see. Are you looking to see somebody who is going to get better at masking the trauma or the mental health issue, and then really what you're doing is strengthening their ability to be in denial? Or are you going to look at somebody who's really working to get that strength and that power that you talked about, to get to a place where they're actually addressing the mental health issue? And I put better mental health management and having that awareness of, okay, I'm having these mental disconnects, or I'm having these struggles with coping with certain things, but this is how we are going to work through it together. And I think that's a very phenomenal thing for you to be able to acknowledge that, you started off with, okay, so I got you ice cream. You feel better? Like, okay, well, now your grades are coming up, so things must be better. No, it's like there's some things there that have to be addressed, and just trying to get better at wearing a better mask that's a better disguise is not going to address the overall issue. So I appreciate you taking that time to go on that. I'm going to catch us up in the chat, and then I got one or two more questions for you. One more question and then one standard question. The first thing in the chat I have here is from Tabitha. She said, you're doing great. Or I'm sorry, y'all country. You ain't even from the country, Tabitha. Y'all are doing great. Chris_YT, which I just found out later down is your sister Jenny. I'm learning a lot, and this helps a lot. Damian Rose says, my takeaway, mental health issues have so many different layers that we all need to make time to be more empathetic to the emotional or psychological trauma that others may be experiencing. Jenny also says, I love you, Kristin. You are a strong woman. Brian says, very important topic to discuss. Appreciate Kristin's transparency. Mental illness deserves our tolerance, our understanding, and commitment to educating ourselves about this misunderstood topic. Absolutely agree with that 100%. And then again, this is your sister. We are listening under my son's account. You guys are doing a great job. Look at that encouragement. We appreciate the encouragement. I'll tell you right now, sometimes you feel like you're on here and you be like, I guess we just talking to each other.
But there's still good conversations, and we're able to let it out and express it. We're sharing.
Correct. True. So my second to last question for you tonight, Christian. I don't know why I just called you Kristin.
You got my grandma around you somewhere, because that's what she
That's what she calls you.
Yes, my grandmother has known me my whole life, calls me Christian.
Wow. See, I was like, Grandma, you're gonna have to learn my name or I ain't gonna talk to you no more.
My Sugarfoot, it works.
There you go. So my second to last question for you, because I assume you might be more knowledgeable in this because of your experience. Where do we find resources in our community to help with mental illness?
First, where I first started off with is I started off with my child's counselor at school. I figured, I'm like, okay, you counsel kids all day. Help me help my child.
Right. Help me.
Help me help my kid. But that's one area. And just through this whole experience, I've learned that even with your own health insurance, they have just like within your workplace, they have a lot of they can offer you assistance and show you like different links. I think I looked up some of them because I took a lot of different classes that kind of like guided me that you can actually go to every state has like a mental health department. You can honestly give them a call and they can guide you and give you different resources as well. So every state should have a mental health department. Not to knock a certain insurance company, but if you're looking for mental health assistance or help, I wouldn't advise you go to Kaiser because they have one of the worst. It's really, but they don't get people in the help that they need. If you really need help, a lot of the times, if you do have Kaiser, you want to ask them for an outside service so you can get the help you need at a quicker in a quicker time frame, because it's not something that you can keep constantly putting off. You need to address it right then and there once you see the signs, because it's like a disease. It'll constantly grow if it's not addressed, if you're not taking care of it. So you want to make sure, take it as something serious. Don't take it as something nonchalant. You want to make sure that it is addressed, and you do take every step that you can to get, whether it's yourself or a member of your family or a friend, to get the assistance that they need so that they can learn how to cope and deal with situations within their own life.
I think that's a hidden gem though that you gave as far as the workplace, because I just recently, I have, like I said, phenomenal benefits at my job, but I didn't even know we had mental health benefits, and it's to the point where the only person who's insured under my insurance is me, but they will cover anybody in my immediate family.
Counseling sessions, they have all of that. A lot of them have always had that, but people just never. I think it's like EAP or something like that.
EAP. I don't even know what the acronym stands for.
I forgot what it was, but employee assistance program, something like that.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
So it's like they have that where you can call counselors, and it's like a I was going to say non-disclosure, but it's like they don't leak it out to other people.
Right. It's confidential.
It's confidential. So there's those options. You can, like I said, the school, your own healthcare providers in every state does have a mental health department, and you can actually call them, look on their website. If you do know someone who is considering suicide, sometimes the suicide line is probably not the best thing to call. I've learned that throughout time. Sometimes you're on hold, or they just tell you, "Oh, go here," or go. They don't really address it or have a way for you to talk out of it, help somebody through it. So it's just talking to someone, trying to see where their mind is at. If you see something, say something, and that goes for kids, adults,
yourself.
Look in the mirror like, I love myself, and believe it. Just, it's being aware. I mean, we're conscious of things that around you, because I have lost really close friends to mental illness. And I would be damned if I lose another person because I didn't pay attention to the signs.
Fair enough. So with that, I'm going to say Tabitha's comment, that's right, and try not to get discouraged. It can be really difficult to find the right providers and resources for treatment. Absolutely. It's like one of the most, if you're to the place where you need a provider, it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make, because this can make or break your healing process or the healing process of the other person. So I'm 100% with that. With that, I want to ask you, Kristin, my last question. It's the same question I ask everybody when we're doing Intersations. It's the last question. For those who are watching via live or somebody who may be watching via the replay, what would be 2 or 3 key takeaways that you would want them to take away from tonight's Intersation?
Be aware. Don't be, I would just say, like, pay attention. If somebody's telling you, or you notice something that's a little off or a little different, or you see somebody struggling with anything, don't be ashamed to address them or talk to them about it, and be open with them. And if it's you, seek help. Talk to someone that you can trust, that you don't feel like you're going to be judged. For those who don't understand, try not to be judgmental. Think about it if you were in that situation. And let's have more conversations about this. Let's be more aware. Let's not feel ashamed. Let's break the stigma of mental illness.
All right.
I probably wanted to say something a little bit more deeper, but that's all I can think of at the moment.
No, that's all right. I'm still writing down. All right. So that is where we're at. We're at the end of your part of the Intersation. How do you feel? No, I'm playing. We don't have to talk about all that live. I really just want to thank you for being on tonight.
I need a cookie.
I really want to thank you, because you were not just transparent, but you were very resourceful and informative, especially on the resources. I think eliminating as many excuses as possible is very important when it comes to mental health. Oh, well, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. All those different things you've addressed tonight. You've even shared, again, your transparency and your own personal experience with that, and what has brought this particular topic to your doorstep. And not just through your daughter, but for yourself, dealing with the stress of that situation, really revealing some of those higher, what I would consider higher functioning mental illnesses, where anxiety, until you reach a certain level of stress, you can live a whole life having anxiety and not know about it. But once you reach that stress limit, oh, you're like, oh, that's what I have is anxiety. Got it. Okay. But I really just, again, want to thank you for taking the time out to be on tonight and share your voice, share your story, share your experience with those of us live in the audience, and with those who, again, are watching via the replay. Even with your closing thoughts, really just bringing it down to awareness, which I think from the perspective of this Intersation, that was the initial goal of this Intersation, is to bring that type of awareness, because it opens up the door for us to have conversations. And when I say us, I mean everybody, to have more conversations with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers, with the people that we're just coming across in life with, and really trying to get to the root of the mental health issues, so that we can begin to address them and come up with working solutions, whether that be a combination of counseling and medicine or counseling, or honestly, just having the right people, like you said, having the right good around you, so that you can be saturated with the things that you need from a nourishment side, or a nourishment standpoint, that will help you get through some of those things that maybe your coping mechanisms are not adequately developed enough to handle at this time. So with that, again, I just want to thank you, but I also want to provide for the first row. As many of you know, the first row is a play on my last name. However, it comes from I'm sorry, my last name being Rowe, W-R-O-E, but it comes from a lesson that I was taught from a business mentor many, many, many years ago, because I was in my teenage years when I was taught this. They told me that the people who sit on the front row, 2 things happen. They make the most money, and they get the most information. And the reason for that is because there is no distraction between them and the person providing the information. Thus, the first row was born. And so because you guys are sitting with us on the first row tonight, one of the things I like to do for every Intersation is provide what I call tools for the first row. So since you're on the first row, there should be no distraction between you and getting these tools. So these are the tools that I kind of came up with as I was creating the content, but they also kind of helped me grasp my thoughts and my feelings about mental health in the community, whether that be the community I grew up in, my friends network, my coworker network, or even just my family, the community. So I think I have 4 or 5 tools. Let's see. I have 4 tools that I want to share with you tonight in regards to mental health in the community. The first tool that I came up with is very spot on with what you were saying, Kristin. You have to acknowledge to address. And what do I mean by that? I'll use an example. So, for instance, you know how, like, if you're in an environment that doesn't smell good. I went to the University of California, Davis for a science program for 5 weeks. And when I first got there, I kid you not, I was like, oh my God, what's that disgusting smell? And it was cow manure because it was so close to like farmland. But by the week number 5, I couldn't smell it anymore. And it was just like I was smell blind to it. Like I just couldn't smell cow manure. It was like, oh, fresh air. Got it. A lot of ways mental health acts like that, where you'll smell it in the beginning, you'll see it in the beginning, and you're like, why am I acting this way? And then over time, your coping mechanism becomes denial. Denial becomes your coping mechanism. And then because denial is your coping mechanism, if somebody tries to bring that to your attention, like, hey, it smells like cow poop over here, or hey, there's a mental health issue over here, your denial will fight tenaciously to defend its stake in keeping you from addressing mental health issues. So the first part is you have to acknowledge it. Without acknowledging it, you can never even get to the point of actually addressing it, or coping mechanisms, or coming up with solutions, or managing mental health. Because it may be something that you can eradicate. It may not be something that you can eradicate, and thus you have to learn how to live with it. Now, it's like a roommate that's never going to go anywhere. One of the interesting things that I found, and this is something I seen years ago on a TED Talk, was a lady who was dealing with schizophrenia. And for those who don't know what schizophrenia is, I'm not a clinical expert, but schizophrenia basically is like you hear voices, you may or may not have multiple personalities, but in a nutshell, that's schizophrenia. But this person talked about how when she first heard the voice in her head that wasn't her voice, and she was walking through the airport and it said she something, and she was like, who's talking? Not realizing it was a voice in her head. And in her denial stage, where she was, oh, I'm a businesswoman, this, that, and the other, all these different things, she was like, I'm not going to address this because I know I'm a powerful woman. Great. That's awesome. However, those voices didn't stop. They just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And it was only when she actually opened, and this may sound off the wall to some people, but it was only when she actually opened up a dialogue with these voices to start to figure out, when this person is talking, what is it that they need? Oh, this person needs to feel safe. So the reason why I'm sitting outside of my parents' room while they're asleep is to protect them with this plastic fork, because there's no silverware in the house. I'm trying to protect them with this plastic fork because I feel like they're in danger. We're in danger. And so now I can open up a dialogue with that and say, hey, we're safe. We're in the house. Let's go down and check and make sure the doors are locked. Let's make sure the windows are locked. And once we have those things locked, we've done everything we can do to be safe in this place. And opening up that dialogue was acknowledgement that there was actually another voice there that needed to feel safe. Now you're in a place where you're having that dialogue. And a lot of not necessarily that we all go to this extreme, but a lot of the things when it comes to acknowledging mental health is opening up that dialogue within yourself to say, why is it that I'm doing this? Why is it that I'm feeling this way? What is it that I'm not connecting with? How do I begin to connect? How do I rectify the misfire? Like, it's opening up that dialogue. It's not saying there's no problem. I don't have anything to work on. I don't know what you guys are talking about. That is not the path to addressing mental health. So that is why that is the first tool. In order to get to addressing a mental health issue, you must first have to acknowledge it. The second tool is one of my favorite tools, because I've been to this quite a bit as a young man and as an adult, is ask for professional help. There are some things that your tribe is just ill-equipped to deal with. Even for yourself, Kristin, when you say, I didn't know a whole lot about this and I had to do a ton of research to get up to speed quick. But while you don't know about it and while you're getting up to speed, that's when the professionals serve their best purpose. That's when they serve, the initial care that's needed for mental health. They serve that initial care component. Then you serve that secondary care, that support system, that base, that foundation on the secondary end. But sometimes you just have to ask for professional help. I know it seems weird, like, because we were talking about not talking to strangers about your business, and really talking to a professional is like talking to a stranger about your business.
They go so deep where you're like, I don't think I need to be sharing this with you. You don't know.
Right.
Like,
my mama don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You can't even, it's like, because most of the time, because I know with it, it's like, oh, just ask Jesus. He'll heal everything. Sometimes it's Jesus ain't enough. Unfortunately, when it comes to this, he is not enough.
Right. I need somebody I can talk to right now on the phone. Now, if Jesus want to call me on the phone, then we can talk.
But I can help with my coping skills and the strength I need, but it is not the cure. Right.
And again, that ask for professional help, part of that is being willing to open up and say that there is an actual issue. So it's kind of tied into the first tool, but it's really about realizing what your capabilities are. I used to have a real arrogant personality when I was younger about, oh, I'm Billy Rowe, I can do whatever. I'm Billy Rowe, I can do whatever. Now I'm like, yeah, I'm Billy Rowe. I'm a pretty capable individual. However, I'm gonna need some help, because if I don't, I'm gonna be Billy Rowe broken down mentally. So be willing to ask for that help that you need. Don't worry about the shame. Don't worry about your ego, because really that's what the shame is, a derivative of your ego. Like, oh, my pride is hurt. Now I'm showing that I'm weak. Again, that weakness. I'm showing that I'm weak and I can't handle this on my own because I'm asking for help. Swallow all that and get yourself to a place that is healthy for you, because the other things that you want to be able to handle come through management and or addressing your mental health issue. And if you need a professional assist on that, don't be ashamed of that. Jump towards it. The third tool that I came up with is mental health is an illness and it is not a weakness. And that is interesting. That is something I heard you say multiple times tonight, is that it's not a weakness. It's an illness, just like every other illness. When you say, you have cancer, when you say you have asthma, like I had limitations on being able to run for a certain amount of time as a child, because my lungs were not capable of providing the oxygen necessary to sustain running. So that is not a weakness. That is an illness. I'm an excellent runner while I can run, but once the air stops, it's time to stop running. So the same thing being for mental illness, it's an illness. It is not a weakness. Just because somebody's brain doesn't fire the same way as yours, or it doesn't fire at the higher capacity that yours may fire at, it doesn't make them weak. It simply means that they have a difference in how they may process information and how they may connect emotionally and how hormones may be running through their body. There's a host of different things that drive mental illness. It's not always just in the mind, but it's a stigma that I feel like has been unjustly placed on people who have mental illness. Even like dyslexia, where maybe reading is more difficult for somebody, that is a mental illness. But I mean, I have dyslexia when it comes to 4s and 7s. I'll see a 4, sometimes I'll say 7, and sometimes I'll see a 4 and I'll add it as a 7. And I'm an analyst who deals with numbers quite frequently.
Into my bank account, that can always be a 7.
It can always be a 7. All right. Well, when I debit this $700, like you said, it can always be a 7.
No, when it's going in, only when it's going into the account.
Oh, in only. Got it. Also, the other reason why I say mental illness is an illness and not a weakness is because one of the things that can drive a person to believe that a person does not suffer from mental illness is because of their strength. In high school, I was a very independent mentality. Like when I tell you, I used to go to high school in slippers and in sweats and in t-shirts. Like I just didn't care about everybody else's opinion in the fashion show thing. So it just wasn't for me. So and it was like, you can wear Jordans if you want. I got a job and I got a car. So your Jordans versus me having this little hoopty putt. I'm gonna take the hoopty putt.
Because you walking in your Jordans, I'm driving.
Right. Or you riding your bike in your Jordans. But the challenge is that people would see that independence and marching to my own drum and not realize that I had times where I was suffering from depression and where I was down and out. And it was weird because I would be present in front of them. And then when I'd be in my own quiet time by myself, where I was yet to that place where I would reflect on life, I was just quiet and it'd be like, oh man, I'm down. I don't know why, or I'm suicidal. And I don't want to be here anymore. I feel like this should be it. And I even remember to the extent where I have a really good friend who came to visit me when it was my birthday. She surprised me on my birthday. And before then, like from 13 all the way to 30 something, yeah, every time my birthday was coming around, I was depressed. And the reason being was because my grandfather died on my birthday. And I didn't even really know him that well. It was like I had met him maybe like 2 or 3 times in my entire life. But what stuck with me was it was the first time I had seen my father, who was a very strong-willed individual, cry. And like seeing him cry was like, oh shit, like Pops is crying. It must be really bad. But it's because he had lost his father. And even though I didn't know how close he was to him and all those different things that worked with that, it affected me for 20 plus years, where when my birthday would come around, I'd get depressed, I'd get sad. And it was like, man, what's going on? And it took really reflecting back deeply and be like, oh, that's because of this particular instant. And then when this friend came and surprised me for my birthday, I immediately said, let's move from this instance that was 20 plus years ago. Let's attach to this feeling, how this feels. So now when my birthday comes around, that same depression, and my birthday just recently passed, that same depression that I used to feel, I don't have that happening anymore. But it's because I addressed it and acknowledged the issue that was there. The issue wasn't just a mental health issue, depression. It was a mental health memory that was attaching my birthday to a depressing moment or to a sad moment. And so once I cleared that up, now that's addressed, I'm like 3 or 4 birthday parties or birthdays after that, I'm feeling great about my birthday. I enjoy and look forward to my birthday. Don't have to be any major celebration, but at least it's a time now that I can enjoy. So again, that tool, I know it kind of got caught up in a lot of different things, but that tool is that mental health is an illness, not a weakness. And I think that that's important to remember, regardless of what anybody puts in front of you. And then the fourth and the final tool, when it comes to mental health, this is more so in dealing with in attempting to help somebody with their mental health issue and being a support network for them. That tool is you cannot do the work for them.
No.
You can set up everything for everybody else, but you cannot do the work for them. Mental health is an issue that we can support and help with, but until that person that has the mental health issue decides that they're ready to do the work, there's not very much that you can do. I mean, except for maybe you can get them committed to a hospital, but if they don't want that help, whenever the hospital lets them go, if they still didn't want that help, they're going back to the same habits, behaviors, and patterns that they were in previously. And so don't beat yourself up over that, but be willing to have the conversations that need to take place. And just because they're not willing or ready to do the work doesn't mean that you don't give up. Doesn't mean that you give up and don't have those conversations, but you have the conversations that you can have in the space that they are willing to work in, and you try to encourage them to move into the place of where they're going to have to do the more difficult work of healing and or just addressing and creating a solution of management around the mental health issue. So really quick, those are the 4 tools that I have for you tonight. First tool being you have to acknowledge to address mental health. The second tool being ask for professional help if you get to that point. The third tool being mental health is an illness, not a weakness. And the fourth tool is that you can't do the work for others. They have to be willing to do the work for themselves. So with that, man, this was
that one last thing that you said was like a really key point. They have to do it on their own.
Right.
You have to be that support that they need, but it does have to come from them.
And sometimes that hurts, because typically if you're trying to be the support for somebody in a mental health issue, it's somebody you know, it's somebody you love, it's somebody you care about, and feeling like, dang, I can't force you to drink this water. No, you're going to drown them in the pond holding their head down. That's what you're going to end up doing. So don't try to force that. just continue to work through encouragement. And I think that's the best advice I can give when it comes to mental health, is work from a perspective of encouragement, not from a perspective of subordination or submission. But other than that, that's all we got for tonight. I really thank you guys for being on live tonight, watching and rocking with us for almost 2 hours. But this is a very deep and meaningful topic. So I think I think I already knew it was going to go a little longer than a typical Intersation. The next time that we will actually be live on the first row will be tomorrow. We have the Wednesday word. That topic will be they're not them. That is, they are not them. If you want to know what that is about, that is tomorrow on May 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just as a little bonus, just to give you guys this heads up, we actually have a second bonus Intersation this week. For those who are interested on a Saturday Intersation, we will have one. It is going to be called Manifesting Your Dreams, and that will be with Damian Rowe. He was in the chat earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here, but he is the author of the book Modern Day Mentor. And he actually, his book is actually being printed right now, so it should be out. Hopefully I'll have a copy in hand by this weekend. But he's going to be talking and sharing in the Intersation what it is to manifest your dreams and what it is to really bring something like a book from concept into reality. So I really hope you guys tune in with us on Saturday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to just get that nugget of wisdom about manifesting your dreams, because dreams may not be necessarily a book. It can be anything that you want it to be, but I think he's going to bring some good tools to the table on how to bring that into reality. So that's what we got with the upcoming shows for the rest of this week. We got tons of more content on the way, tons of different things that we're looking at and exploring. And as the summer gets more and more busy, I still promise I'll be here for the Wednesday word and a Tuesday Intersation. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. If you haven't subscribed already, please click the subscription button. And when you click that subscription button, click the bell so you can be notified when we are live on the first row. Other than that, if you like this video, please share it. If you share this video, please like it. If you know somebody who's dealing and struggling with mental illness, please share this specific video with them. Whether you send it via email, send it via Facebook, whatever you do, get this message to them so that they can be experience some of the growth that I feel like we've all experienced tonight. Other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. One love, peace, and God bless.